Well, it's been hot, really, really hot. Friday was, I guess, the crux of the week when it got to 104, and then the heat index was 110. That Friday, Sheila and I was at Lowe's in the garden department. You know, that part that's outside and has that white canopy over it, and we were trying to check out, and it was. The line wasn't going very fast at all. As a matter of fact, at some point in time, it just wasn't even going. And there wasn't any wind. The sun was hitting down to that white canopy, and it just made things so intense. I didn't know if I could stay in line or not. Really hot. I'm sure you could probably tell me something of the experience that you had during the heat this week. One of my dogs could. The old Spicy one, boy, she got knocked down pretty good. Had to leave her inside the house for a day, trying to keep her from having a stroke, I suppose. Heat. And I thought about hell. And the heat that I was experiencing there, standing in line, isn't anything near what God's talking about in hell. But you know, I thought this would be a good time to preach on hell. Maybe we should turn off the air conditioners while we're preaching on this and get a firsthand experience. I'd like for us to look at what the Bible has to say. Well, not all of what the Bible has to say, but some of the main points of hell. It's a reality. I know, you know, people make jokes about it and use it as part of their common language. Not thinking very seriously, are they? But before we do, I want to make mention that the Bible oftentimes tells us to meditate upon God's Word. This past week, as Sheila and I, we've been reading through the Psalms right now, and one of the Psalms we read through was Psalms 119. And 7 times in that one Psalm, it said to meditate upon God's precepts, His law, His commandments. To meditate is more than just, okay, I thought about it. It came to me. Now I'm thinking about something else now. To meditate means to take time to think about it and to mull it over and to focus upon it and to think deeply about it and roll it. Actually, it means to roll it over in our minds over and over. It stays there and we contemplate things about whatever that meditation might be. Now, granted, I'd much more like to meditate upon heaven, meditate upon the attributes of God, meditate upon the attributes of my brethren. But since hell is often mentioned in the commandments, the precepts of God, we need to make sure we're meditating upon that too. You know, God wants us to make it to heaven, and He gives us motivational factors. He tells us about heaven, and boy, that's a motivational factor. If we meditated and thought about and read the scriptures about heaven and to think about the wonders of heaven, yeah, that's a motivational fact to live God's way. But think about God Himself and how He loved us when we were sinners, and He did what He did. That's a motivational factor for me to make it to heaven so I can be with my spiritual Father. But then also He gives us the motivational factor of hell. And I rather suspect that with the great number of people, I'm not talking about just in the Lord's church, but in denominationalism and even in the world, who make a decision to seek God, the motivational factor is hell. To understand that hell's a horrible place. So let's meditate this morning upon some of the descriptions that God gives to us to help keep us out of heaven and to make it into heaven and to be with Him. That's what we want. That's what He wants. So it's a win-win situation. But what about hell? Well, there are many passages that we could look at concerning the first aspect I'd like for us to consider. Well, I'd like for us to consider Matthew chapter 13 49 and 50. And notice what it says. So it will be at the end of the age, that is the end of time. The angels will come forth, separate the wicked from among the just. And speaking about the wicked, he says, and cast them into the furnace of fire. The furnace of fire. Every one of us has been by fire. I know that we might have an electric range top, but no doubt we've been by campfires, fireplaces. But the furnace of fire. There was a time when I was going to college, I worked for about a year and a half or so at a manufacturing plant called Little Giant Pump Company. I understand that they've taken their construction place, I think in Mexico, maybe China, I don't know. But when I was there, being a youngster and young legs, I was assigned to be the helper of the maintenance man. And that was a pretty neat job. A lot of variety, learning how to weld, learning how to do this, that, and the other. But one of the things once in a while was to take the cardboard boxes in which things were shipped to the company, take those cardboard boxes out to the company furnace. I'd never seen anything like it. And if you've never seen a furnace, you've never seen anything like it. There was a certain way you had to open that furnace. They had these doors that would come down together, but they were hooked by pulleys so that when you opened one, both of them opened up. And when you closed one, both of them closed up. But you could not stand there in front of the furnace that was going and open that door. It would have been too hot. More than unbearable. It probably would have damaged some skin. Rather, you had to stand off the side where the bars were and pull the bars, then either take the boxes, cardboard boxes, and throw them in there, or stand off at the back a ways and throw it in from there. And the flames were burning. It was intense. You could feel it even when the doors were shut. And to stand back and look inside that thing with the flames just went like a campfire. It was just flames all throughout that confined metal large box. The furnace of fire. That'd get you thinking. When I was going to college at OC, Oklahoma Christian, I met one of my dear friends, tremendous. He'd be a great friend to anybody. And I was helping him and his wife move, and his father-in-law was there. It was one of our hot days like we have here. And then you got inside that U-Haul, and it was intensely hot. And so his father-in-law and him, Don, and another fellow was there. Now, I don't think he was a member of the Lord's church, if I remember correctly. And that fellow said, "Boy, it is hot." And I'll never forget, and it has influenced me, that my friend's father-in-law said, "Yeah, it makes you appreciate hell, doesn't it?" Makes us understand. Standing at Lowe's in that hot day makes me appreciate or think about hell. Hell is a place that's a furnace of fire. As a matter of fact, this verse, which I did not read, I will continue to read. He cast them into the furnace of fire. There will be wailing and gnashing of teeth. The wailing. The wailing. This verse appears in other passages, and sometimes that same word is translated weeping. Let us not think that it's merely a weeping, a mere sobbing, but it's a wailing. Have you ever heard a person in intense pain? They don't weep, they wail. And they don't care what other people are going to think about their wailing because they're concerned about the intense pain that they're having. And that's what it's talking about. Why the wailing? Because the pain is in the furnace of fire. There's been times, perhaps you have too, that I've had some kind of pain. It must have been a year, maybe longer, it sure seemed like it, to where I had something wrong with my back. And I believe what it turned out, it was due to stress, and the muscle was just contracted. And, it is very, very hard to sleep. It is just incredibly painful. And in situations like that, I think, this will go away. Well, at that time, I didn't know if it would or not. But we might have a stomach virus where our stomach's hurting really bad, or something's hurting really bad. And we might think, this is going to go away in another couple of days. I got a shot, it's going to go away in another 30 minutes. But to think, for our own advantage, to think, what would it be like to have this pain forever? Wailing and the gnashing of teeth. We have pains sometime when we wince, getting a shot maybe. We have pains when we might kind of moan. We have pains when we grind, we grit our teeth. And that's the most intense pain, other than when it gets to the point that when it causes you to pass out. So God is telling us that this place is a furnace of fire. And therein, the occupants, they wail and they grind, they grit their teeth because the pain is so unbearable. We need to meditate upon that. The Bible has a lot of other passages about this. Let me just allude to the meaning, the teachings of three of them. In Matthew chapter 3, verse 12, it says, he calls it an unquenchable fire. If you have a house that's burning and you take a bucket of water and you throw it on there, you didn't quench the fire. The fire was greater than the quenching power. God is telling us that this fire is going to be so intense, so hot, that there's no factor that can quench it, no factor that can put it out. The furnace, unquenchable. Revelation 20, verse 15, calls it a lake of fire, like being in that furnace, or being in a building where the totality of the walls round about and the ceiling are on fire, engulfed, surrounded by the fire. It's not like standing at a fireplace and getting warm over here, but you're still cold back here, but it's intensity, the fire throughout. Luke 16:24, the rich man was in the place of torment. Thayers tells us that word means to have intense pain. Torment, tormented. Not merely discomfort, not merely just a pain, but an agonizing, unending torment. Yeah, I was able to get out of the heat from that line, get back in the car, turn the air conditioner on. But the fire God's talking about is far worse and cannot be quenched. Yes, we need to meditate upon it, because once we pass this life, or once Jesus comes a second time, and once a person touches their toe, as it were, to test the fires of hell, there's no way to come back to earth and say, I'm going to do it all over again. I'm going to be right now. I'm going to be devoted and loyal and obedient and loving to God. We need to be doing it now. We need to meditate, to visualize, to think about what it'd be like. The motivation for not going to hell. Another aspect about hell. Now, that would be bad enough, would it not? And I dare say that that's generally how people think about hell. When they think about hell, they think about the heat, the pain, the fire. But there's a whole lot more factors. In Revelation 21, verse 8, I've thought about passing this one over, at least some parts of it, But here, God has it here, and we need to think about it and consider it. Revelation 21, verse 8. But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the abominable, the murderers, the sexually immoral, the sorcerers, the idolaters, and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone. Brimstone, I've heard about that. I've heard of preachers preaching the fire and brimstone sermon. Well, what does brimstone mean? I just assumed that it was something hot because, fire. Yes, it's like a sulfur. Perhaps it might even be a sulfur. And I understand that the information that I got, that it burns extremely hot. But that's not the factor I want to bring out here. I haven't experienced this, so I'm taking their word for it. And they say that the burning of this brimstone or this sulfur puts out a nauseous, odious smell. Something that's just, it's repulsive. And we try to get away from there, whatever that spot might be. Just don't want to smell that. Some things we don't want to taste, but there's some things we just don't even want to smell. When I was attending Southwestern College in Weatherford, I was running track. And one of the things I do in my training, I'd go out by myself. Sometimes I'd try to get in extra training more than the other guys in our normal practice. And I would just run out in the country, run down a dirt road. And at some point in time, I never did see the animal, but an animal had died real close to where that road went. And when I went through there, of course, you're running and you're huffing and puffing, and boy, you get a big whiff of that horrible, horrible smell, stench. And boy, I held my breath and I ran out of there and I expelled and I breathed deeply and I expelled. I wanted all that, I wanted it out of my body. And pardon me, but I wanted it out of my mouth and I was spitting and, oh, boy, it was horrid. And so when I came back through, I held my breath and ran through. And I did that for about a week. Odious, odious. Well, maybe you've never had the blessing of smelling a dead animal. But, we've had kids, we've been kids ourselves, and, we've experienced throwing up, vomit. That's another smell that's just can't stand. And so God is telling us, fire and brimstone, yes, the heat, but the smell itself is horrible, and you can't get away from it. You can't run away from it down the road. Just without the fire and the pain, the smell is bad enough for an eternity not to want to go to hell. So let's pass on by that one. Now in Jude, verse 13, we see something else. Now there are other passages that talks about this, but this one here I think is most descriptive. It talks about, as I'm breaking into the middle of a sentence from verse 12, it says, raging waves of the sea, foaming up their own shame. It's talking about those who are wicked. Wandering stars for whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever. Elsewhere, the Bible talks about darkness. Elsewhere, it talks about the outer darkness as though in a city, and then you travel outside that city where it's dark, no lights, and we have no moon. I suspect all of us have been in that situation. It is very, very dark, very dark. But now it goes to the ultimate, saying the blackness of darkness, giving me the idea that the darkness is black without any light. You know, as a child, I didn't like being in the dark. But as an adult, I don't want to be in the blackness of darkness. Maybe you've experienced this. Now, I'm giving you some of my experiences. I don't know about your experiences, so I can't relate them. But the experiences that I have had are common. So therefore, as I mention what I have, I hope that it goes back in your mind of the times that maybe you've experienced this. When I was a youth, my granddad, as we lived in Houston, would take us up on the summer trip to go up to Quinlan, Quinlan, Oklahoma. Well, if you don't know where Quinlan, Oklahoma is, it's right by Moreland. If you don't know where Moreland is, it's somewhat close to Woodward. Northwest Oklahoma, the Alabaster Caverns. I understand that Alabaster Caverns are very, very rare. Usually it's in limestone. Very neat place to go. But I remember as a youth, as we would walk along, it was hot outside. You walk inside, and I think it's something like about 50 degrees, but it just felt great. And you're walking through these smooth tunnels, this cavern, and there's water still yet trickling through, and the bats, and you're going along, and the lights shine up various features and figures of the cave, but you can still sense a darkness. But you get to a certain place, which is in the lowest part of that cave, in which no light comes in, no reflection light bouncing off, no light gets in this place. But they got the bulbs on. So the tour guide says, now stand still, hold on to your grandparent, hold on to the rail, and I'm going to turn the lights off. Now I thought, big deal. I've turned my lights off in my room, and I can still see light. So she turned the lights off, and bang, it was dark. I thought, okay, just wait a minute. My eyes will get adjusted. I'll be able to see my granddad here, and it never happened. Went back the next year. I was prepared for it. I was ready to go. Turn off the lights. Couldn't see anything. I put my fingers in front of my face, hoping that she wouldn't turn the light on when I was doing this. But I could not see any kind of wiggles. I couldn't see a blackness of darkness and maybe just a little bit grayer over here. It was completely black. Cast them to the blackness of darkness forever. I've been up since then, I took our daughter, Sheila, up to the Cave of the Winds, Colorado Springs. Now, I got to admit, I can't remember if they turned the lights off or not. I think they did. But the thing I do remember was that tour guide said, stick with me, because if you get lost, you don't have this darkness. She said, I cannot remember the exact figure. Maybe I need to call them up and find it, but I know it was less than a year. I think it was something like 7 months. She said that a human being, when they're in the blackness of darkness, will go mad. We can't bear it. We can't bear it. Just absolutely nothing. Can't see nothing. You might try sometime at nighttime, if you have a bathroom and maybe an inner bathroom, to go in there, turn off the lights, put the towels down where a light might come. And I think we might be able to simulate that cave, to simulate and get a taste and experience of the outer and blackness of darkness. God tells us this, the blackness of darkness and the smell and the heat, so that we can experience to some degree these things here upon earth, and to help us, if we meditate and think about it, that this is what hell is going to be like. And I just simply do not want it. Yes, that is what hell is like. Now, if the blackness of darkness, if that's all there was to it, I still wouldn't want to go to hell. Turn mad. The smell all by itself, if that was it, I wouldn't want to go to hell. The pain, unending, I wouldn't want to go to hell. But all three of them together, there's something else. I think oftentimes in preaching, we don't say or think about or emphasize. It's found in Romans chapter 1. In Romans chapter 1, verse 32, and then I'll skip back to some other passages. In 32, the last verse of that chapter, speaking about those who were wicked, who, knowing the righteous judgment of God, that those who practice such things are deserving of death. We're talking about the hell that we're talking about. And not only those who do the same, but also who approve of those who practice them. Well, let me just throw something in here. People might not want to practice homosexuality, but they'll vote it in and they'll allow it to go. People might not have an abortion themselves, but they'll vote it in and say, well, you just do what you want to do and I'll do it. And those who approve of those who practice. Christians are different. So he's talking about those who go into eternal hell. Now, who are those he's talking about? Notice back in verse 28 through 31. Let me preface it this way. I'm going to read some characteristics here. No, not characteristics. Some people. People who do things that is going to cause them to go to eternal hell. Now, these are going to be the occupants, those who are in hell. And if we don't make it to heaven, better make it personal. If you don't make it to heaven, this is the kind of people that you're going to be with. In the blackness of darkness, with that smell, in the intense pain. Here's your company. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them up to a debased mind to do those things which are not fitting. God just said, okay, you just have at it. And they did. They made their own laws. Being filled with all unrighteousness, sexual immorality, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder. Now, we're not just reading words here. This is a classification, a kind of people. God didn't make them that way, but they gravitated that direction and they got worse and worse and they murdered and so forth. Strife, trouble, fight, deceit, evil-mindedness. What kind of people are we dealing with? Not with ourselves here. Good-minded people. People who have warped and evil minds. Whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, violent, not peaceful, violent people, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents. If you're going to be disobedient to parents, you'll be disobedient to the school teachers. Be disobedient to them, you'll be disobedient to the government. Disobedient to the government, disobedient to God. Just a disobedient people. Me, myself, and I. Undiscerning, untrustworthy, unloving, unforgiving, unmerciful. And then we get to verse 32 that we begin with. They're deserving of death, spiritual death, deserving of hell. Now, the point that we want to make out here is, that's the occupants. I'm sure I'm safe in saying that you don't want to be around people here on earth that are like that. Their minds are just evil-minded. They might even be thinking about, as you're walking by, what they can do to rob you or something. A couple months ago, Sheila and I, we had our realtor who helped us get our house. She does this. She did it for all the people that she got houses for. She bought us some tickets for the Dodgers game here, the Oklahoma City Dodgers, and it was really, really neat, the meal and everything. That's not the point. Afterwards, it was later in the day, and Sheila and I was walking along, and we had to walk along a stretch of a street that I didn't really want to walk along. People would be coming out of the bars dressed in terrible, terrible ways. The language, I didn't want to be around that. You don't either. I shudder to think that if somehow I was mistaken for somebody else and I was put into our state penitentiary, but here, that's the kind of people, and at its worst. And it will get worse because they're in a bad situation. You know, people that have pain and agony, that they get even worse. I've heard of dogs that have gotten stuck, their head stuck in a fence, and you try to get on one side and push them out, and although it's you're his master, they'll bite you if you're pushing their head back through the fence and it's hurting their ears, they'll bite you. Pain makes things worse. And so what we see here upon earth, it's going to intensify. And so can you imagine? You need to take time to meditate upon this? I have. And yes, blackness of darkness. But there's still people around. They're still wailing, feeling around. They might get right up into your face, right into your ear. They might, who knows, bite your ear off if they're in pain, might fight you. A lot of times people, when they're in pain and so forth, they're suffering, the thing they resort to is fighting. And there's no one, no police department to pull them off. No one to come to your rescue. God has hidden his face from those in hell. You're on your own. The occupants who are going to be there in the worst condition that they themselves are going to be in than what we read here in the scriptures. If that were the only condition of hell, I still would not want to go there. We need to think about what God is saying. One last thing that I wanted to pay attention to is the other aspect that most people think about, and that is it's everlasting, as in eternal, as in never, 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 never ending. In Matthew chapter 25, verse 41, then he will also say to those on the left hand, the wicked, depart from me. You're gone. Not just for a season where you can come back. It is a complete departure. Depart from me, you cursed, into the everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels. We've talked about the fire. An occupant also is the devil and his servants. Everlasting. Everlasting. How can we grasp eternity? I've tried to, I don't know if I can understand every attribute about God. Infinite in his power, I can kind of grasp that. Infinite in his knowledge, I can kind of grasp that. But to have never had a beginning since when? He's always been here. And then to always be here. Eternity. One way that I've tried to help myself grasp an eternity is to visualize this earth being nothing but one big ball of steel. And then at the equator, or we can just kind of draw a line right here and make it to where it goes the distance of an equator. That we take one ant, put that ant here. I've looked this up. The average ant goes about 1/17 of a mile per hour. So you let that ant, and he's going to walk right in the middle, right there on that our own personal equator. And let that ant start walking around the earth. In 48 and 1/2 years, we're going to see that ant come right here again. 48 and 1/2 years. And I don't know, how many feet does it have? 6? Spiders have 8. So I don't know, do they have feet? The end of their legs. It goes along. And how much wear and tear is a I can't even say a featherweight, because the ant is lighter than a feather. How much wear and tear is going to occur on that steel right here? And he's not stepping in every single spot. He's stepping like, we do, just here and there. How much wear and tear is it going to take for him to go around and around and around and around and around for it to get kind of a shiny spot on that trail? That's unfathomable. How much time is it going to take for him to wear down a trench 1 inch deep? That's unfathomable. How much time will it take him to walk and walk and walk and wear out the totality of that pathway and the earth breaks in two? I don't know. That would seem like eternity to me, but eternity has no end. So when that ant finally does that, then eternity has just spent that much time. And actually, that's not even correct, because there's not going to be an end to time. But to help us to meditate it upon hell in this aspect of forever, its existence. That's the best way that I myself can explain eternity, is just existing. No end, existing. Existing in that furnace of fire. We can put our hands up to a fireplace. We can put our finger up to a candle, close, and pull our hands back because it's just too hot. Or maybe as I've done this past week, I was at some public place, and washing my hands, and the water was getting really hot, and I was hurrying, and boy, I just had to pull my hands out because it was just hurting. And I thought, I've just got just a little bit of soap left. Let me just stick it on there for a moment, and I had to pull my hands back out. But see, in hell, you can't do that. And it's all around. Eternity and the darkness, madness, the stench, and the occupants. And there's no rest, no stopping. So what about hell? We don't want to go there. We want to go to heaven. So what's that going to make us do? What's that going to make us do? These thoughts as we meditate upon these. Let me read as we close in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 8 and 10, and then verse 17. In Ephesians 5, verse 8 and 10. I'm going to skip 9 because it's a parenthetical phrase that takes us away from the thought. But the sentence reads, "For you were once darkness," meaning spiritual darkness, sin, lost for hell. "You were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light, finding out what is acceptable to the Lord. Therefore, do not be unwise, but understand what the will of the Lord is." Brethren, if we ignore the meditation that we've been doing here this morning, we are, it says, unwise. We're children of the light. We need to walk in the light. We need to find out what the will of the Lord is. So yes, we need to love God. We need to make sure that we're working on that. We need to love the Bible. We need to go to it and read. We need to love being able to assemble at worship in the presence of God and with one another. We need to make sure that we're being the kind of person we need to be. Because once we breathe our last, And we find ourselves in one or the other places, and the place that we don't want to be because I've been a negligent Christian. Nothing we can do about it, but we can now. Brethren, let's love God. Let's meditate. May the summer of the heat help us spiritually. The invitation song's been selected. If you're not a Christian, you have every reason in the world, every reason in eternity to become a Christian. For the salvation of your soul, not to go to hell, but to go to heaven, which is, we talked about how horrible hell is, and just as horrible as hell is wonderful as heaven. We'll have a sermon on that sometime. By your faith in Jesus Christ as the Son of God, by a change of mind, by a change of heart, because you are grieved for the way that you've lived and sinned against God, and by making that good confession that you believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, and to be baptized means to be immersed in the water. That's what God tells us to do. He could have told us to do anything, 10 jumping jacks. I would have done them. But he says to be put under the water and come back. He wants to see if we will obey him. We have died to the love of sin. We're a dead person, and so we are buried, and then we are coming back out of the water. There's the new birth that Jesus speaks about in John chapter 3, verse 3 and 5. It's not faith only. That's not a birth. The water coming out is the new birth. If you're a Christian, you need to make some corrections in your life, personally or publicly, by your repentance, confession, and prayer. We have that opportunity. So won't you come while together we encourage ourselves with the singing of the words of this song.